Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Coët.
Polls show voters want action on gun reform. Lawmakers feeling increasing pressure during what is right now their August recess. Senator Joni Ernst, a Republican from Iowa, held a town hall just this week, and a local teacher shared an important and emotional experience about back-to-school training.
Part of my teacher training this past week, I was asked to listen to popping sounds and then determine if they were gunshots or not. I was then asked to be trained to man a family reunification center, to provide counseling to parents seeking their children following a catastrophic event. So my question for you today, Senator, is when can I plan to get back to trainings that simply teach children to read and write?
You can see the strong reception there. Now, Ernst responded by talking about mental health, but those constituents, including those people who clapped at the end there, they wanted more.
So we'll go ahead and move on, but we are going to look and have a discussion about all of these items that have been brought up today. So I appreciate your concern, but we have had many decisions.
Congress is not in session, but you can see people demanding they get back to work on this issue. And none of this is happening in a vacuum. We want to report something you may not have seen yet from news this weekend. Authorities arresting 3 men they say were looking at trying to do 3 separate mass shootings. One of them reportedly a self-described white nationalist who attended, yes, the Charlottesville rally. I'm very happy to tell you one piece of good news, which is on the beat. We are now joined by the very teacher who confronted Senator Ernst at that town hall, Ellie Holland, and Mike Lupica, a columnist for the New York Daily News who's written about this issue a lot. My thanks to both of you, but especially to you, Ellie, for being willing to talk about this tough subject.
Yeah, I wish I could say that I was happy to be here. It's hard to have to keep bringing this subject up.
Yeah, it's hard, and when we think about how we engage these discussions, there's all of the bad news, there's dealing with reporting the facts, and then there's the other part of it, which is everyone just going to be sort of pulled down by this, or can there be uninformed and real discussion of policy for potential reform? It seemed like that's what you were driving at. My first question to you tonight is, what did you think of the senator's answer? It was certainly disappointing to me. Immediately after I asked a question that was
clearly a concern about active shooters, she tried to pivot it to things like equate it to fire drills and tornado drills, and that's not what people are concerned about today. So thankfully the crowd reacted, and then she immediately went on to talk about mental health being a key issue in most school shootings, which my friends that are psychologists tell me is just not accurate, that a very small percentage of the shooters have mental health concerns, and that in fact people that have mental health concerns are more apt to be victims of violence rather than perpetrate it.
When you look at this in your classroom, do you see this over time affecting students differently today? Do you see this as something that affects their sense of safety and their ability to focus?
Certainly, from my point, from a teacher training point, we are spending a lot of time learning how to deal with active shooters and keeping our children safe, and so that takes away from the time that we really need to be on the cutting edge to teach them simple things like how to read and write and how to get along with their friends. And yes, school children do come to school anxious, about shooting situations, and it's not just the children that are anxious. Teachers, sure. Adults, sure. Are afraid and have anxiety surrounding these events.
Let me bring in Mike. So hang with me. And Mike, what do you think?
Mm-hmm, sure.
Well, first of all, Ari, we live at a time in this country where we keep saying, who's going to stand up and represent the country that we still aspire to be? And to stand up and ask that question the other night, that's the America that we still want to be. Those people in that hall were tired of listening to Joni Ernst get rolled by the NRA and just spout NRA talking points. And they called BS on her in the state of Iowa, and I actually thought it was kind of thrilling. Yes, no one would dispute that mental health is an issue in this conversation. But I always go back to a line the great Pete Hamill once used, Ari. How many home runs did Babe Ruth hit without a bat? So for them to want to talk about everything except guns, for a failing organization like the NRA, someday these politicians who have gotten rolled by the NRA are going to wonder just to whom they sold their souls. I thought the sound and that scene the other night was tremendous in Iowa.
Well, I think it's so important, as you say, and Ellie, Mike's giving you a shout out, obviously, because what we're talking about really is whether any of these arguments make sense upon a basic discussion in public, right? I mean, there are complexities to this, and I've studied the law, and there are constitutional issues in gun rights. But when you get out to, well, should we do screenings or not? And what are you going to do as a teacher? It seems that regular Americans, civilian Americans, voters in these halls are confronting some of the inadequate answers in their view of their leaders. I want to play a little more from this because, again, for our viewers, we follow politics. August is a slow time, but it's not slow for what you were just doing. It's not slow if you go out and take these town halls seriously. A little bit more of Senator Ernst's response after your question. Let's take a look.
A lot of the incidents that we see do come back to mental illness. We are short counselors. We are short psychologists.
We're short Congress people that take action.
Almost out of time, so briefly to Ellie and then Mike, your final thoughts on where we go from here.
Well, there was a lot of talk about Second Amendment rights, but I would just like to have people think about a child's right to sit in their classroom and feel safe and not have to worry about being a victim of gun violence. The Second Amendment is great, but maybe we need a 34th Amendment that says children have a right to be safe while they're trying to learn in schools.
It is Tuesday, the 20th of August of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. I have to tell you, just a small scant dash of smoked hot Hungarian paprika makes all the difference in the world. Oh, of course, if you have the Spanish kind, it works just as well. Some people say better, but that's only because it's more rare. Rare doesn't necessarily mean better. It just means more rare. All right. Oh, before we start, stop using your sea salt in your regular cooking. Stop throwing sea salt in your pasta water. It's too expensive. All right? And I should remind folks that you're probably getting iron deficiencies if you're not putting on regular table salt somewhere. Just saying. If you're going to throw salt in your pasta water, kosher salt is just fine. Okay? I mean, that sounds redundant. Kosher is just fine. But, yeah, you could throw some table salt in there. It's probably in some ways better for you all around because of the iodine. Not to be confused with iodide. All right? Loading up on iodine to keep from being poisoned by radiation. It's iodide. All right. Well, Vlad continues to lie about radiation levels spiking. And did you know that monitoring stations, 2 of them went offline? Now, there's been some speculation that was Vlad taking him offline, and there's been other speculation that the blast zone is much larger than they thought. Okay. Well, get out of the IMF treaty. We apparently... And I got to tell you, I'm shocked that we've been developing intermediate missiles during the time that we had a ban on intermediate missiles. And apparently, Vlad had some intermediate missiles, too, that they weren't supposed to have. Wow. Treaties and laws, that's for little people. Okay. I think there's going to be a shaking of the tree, if you know what I mean, if you get my drift. Indeed, because we do live in a representative democracy. Do not be afraid to call it a democracy, by the way. I'm tired of this. It is a democracy, and we are a representative democracy, and when people tell us that they hate the government, that means they hate us, and they hate themselves, too. A lot of self-hate out there, apparently. So much self-hate, they'd like to separate themselves from themselves. Intellectually, I can understand what that would entail. I really don't want to go there. Because, as I posted yesterday, you know, when I was a kid, when I was young, we had a president who inspired the youth to follow their better angels, learn a few languages, and join the Peace Corps. Now we have a president who encourages and inspires the youth to shoot up mosques, synagogues, and Mexicans at Walmart. USA. And apparently to the sycophants, the cultists, the Trump bro cult 45s, none of that exists. None of that happened. It's all the liberal leftist press. Oh, just making it all up. Yeah, I posted some elderly Jewish women who were having a Shabbat, a little prayer service at the Portland Proud Boy rally. I guess you'd call it a rally, whatever it was, when the Proud Boys came into Portland over the weekend. And one of these, I don't know, do you call them furry bears? What is it about the Proud Boys and their bear look? Yeah, husky. We're all husky. Regardless, one of these fellows stuck a phone on a selfie stick into their faces, trying to rile them up. And they continued praying. And I posted that I thought that this is 1,000 times more effective, because what happened is that the Proud Boy walked off because he couldn't get the response that he wanted. And I posted, I thought that was 1,000 times more effective than what Black Bloc does. What's the first response? That never happened. People need to look into the sources of these things. Now they want to look into the sources. But it's fairly rich. When people who defend the Proud Boys and accuse us when we post things that have happened, like some elderly Jewish women getting harassed by a Proud Boy, and they just continue praying, and the guy walks off sulking because he couldn't get the response that he expected from these leftist, commie, violent people. That now they want to check sources, which is rich since I know some of these people. But regardless, they want to check sources. And this is coming from people who are defending a group who's organized by, an InfoWars staffer. Thank you very much. What's on the rest of the menu here? In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. At the top, that was an Iowa teacher on Ari Melber's show who confronted Joni Ernst on gun control at a town hall, and Joni is lock, stock, and barrel, no pun intended. Pretty much beholden to the NRA, even though they don't have those Russian rubles to launder anymore. Well, maybe they do. Maybe they do. Okay. On the rest of the menu, Facebook and Instagram removed the accounts of white supremacist James Alsop, although his YouTube account remains up. Yeah, another Trump follower, young man, 23, not following his better angels. Such inspiration from above. Such inspiration. Another white nationalist is arrested for threatening to attack a Jewish community center, this time in Ohio. Another Trump bro who just wants to set the world right. And I mean with a capital R. And the Florida bar shredded Matt Gaetz for his unprofessional and reckless attempt to intimidate a witness. Shredded him so much they let him keep his law license. But hey, at least he got shredded. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the British Foreign Office is concerned at reports that a Hong Kong staffer is detained in mainland China. Of course, the whole reason for the protests is that the protesters are fighting an extradition law they're trying to put into effect, which essentially means that people will be grabbed out of Hong Kong and taken to mainland China to, be put on the kangaroo court there. And in a retrial, an El Salvadoran court acquitted a woman accused of killing her stillborn child. The Handmaid's Tale is not just for white people anymore. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. I really think that The Handmaid's Tale is one of the great novels of all time. But I only bring it up because it really depicts a dystopian future in which really a future for black women and women of color, really this dystopia has been in existence for them in their distant past, in their recent past, and also right now in this present. For women of color, it's not the future. It is the now. If you would please go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page, right over there next to the, right there by the social media scroll. I'll get it out. Don't worry. Is our chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And thank you, Kelly, for doing that. She does much more than just monitor the chat room link. Plus, she has to pay her own bills, which means she has a real life. Okay. Like all of us do. And if you would then please take a gander. Yes, we use that language here. We certainly do. Take a gander to the leftish of the page, and you will notice our Patreon link. And all kidding aside, please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We have no, corporate monies. And would we take them? I don't know. Depends on what kind of corporation. Not all corporations are the evil big ones like Shell. Yeah, Shell, I'm looking at you. And, but I don't know. I mean, sometimes like the little tool shop has incorporated as an LLC. That's technically a corporation now, but we're not even getting those monies because though the bulk of the funds that we use to keep this resistance radio resisting comes out of our own wallets, you are our largest, not just biggest, but our largest contributor too, because of the amounts of monies that you send our way. So if you could, become a recurring Patreon and maybe send the amount of money that you would spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance. Send those dollars our way. We stretch them beyond compare, and we have a lot of experience, over 8 years now, of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio by the hardest working crew in internet radio for the last 8 years, I got to tell you. Thank you, crew, and thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. Do so by just simply going to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that, and we are so glad he does. I take care of @Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get those links out on social medias because, hey, not everybody lives on Daily Co's. They don't. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so @CookbookWest. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found mixed in with all the rest of us. We happen to be in the W's. Some people call that W. I say W when I'm feeling jolly. Now, I have some friends, and I will confess, my friends run the gamut of the political spectrum, okay, just like family. I mean, I've mentioned my Trump bro. When I say my Trump bro, I mean, I actually have a brother who is a Trump bro, and he's my Trump bro. Well, I also have friends that run the gamut of the political spectrum, and I got to say, a couple of the Trump bros are in jail for long-term sentences. Yeah, never saw that coming, did I? But regardless, I also have friends who are of the libertarian persuasion. Yep, let's just put it this way. They don't mind living in this socialism that we have, as long as they don't have to pay taxes on it. They'll take all the services, but they really don't like to pay. But regardless, one of their big arguments that I get is that the youth of today, just by attrition, will stamp out all racism because the youth today, they will say, by and large, are just not racist anymore. They're much more accepting. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, one of my axioms, and I understood that even before my son was born, is that children are not only the hope for the world. Children can also be the most cruel. Have you ever been on a schoolyard? Come on. Carry that mentality into adulthood. How about a young adult? So, to me, right now, I don't know. I've had so many decades on this earth. I used to laugh at old guys when they would talk like this. And now I am one. But regardless, a 23-year-old is still a kid. I know when I was 21, I was on top of the world. I knew everything. It took me a while to realize I can't know everything. I can know a lot, but I can't know everything. So I recognize how much of a kid I was back in the day. So I don't really put a whole lot of hope in just standing back and letting the youth, just by attrition, get rid of racism. No, we still need to be active participants because racism, bigotry, and authoritarianism, all of that, it's caustic like rust. We have to get up every day and rub that rust out every day. They don't call it the ship of state for nothing. You don't sit on your ass in a representative democracy that is the ship of state. You got to get up every day and get out there and do that work. You gotta rub out the rust. Okay. Enough of the metaphors. This first offering is by Casey Michelle, How to Think Progress. Facebook and Instagram suspended the accounts of 23-year-old white supremacist James Alsop last week. The latest move to tamp down fascistic language spreading across the platforms in recent years. Of course, I have to argue with people that say they have a constitutional right to spread their fascistic beliefs. And all that it entails, the lies, the gaslighting, the revisionist history, and if you say anything about them lying, you are trying to shut down free speech and debate. Yeah, they're going to burn your books before they throw you into the incinerator. Trust me, we've seen this not just once, not just twice. It has an historical normalcy to it almost. Well, it was first discovered that Alsop's accounts were unavailable during a search of both social media sites over the weekend. Alsop also confirmed he'd been suspended in a video last Tuesday. The move follows a similar decision by Uber and from Twitter, which suspended Alsop's account in late 2017. Alsop's YouTube account, which currently has 450,000 followers, remains up almost 500,000 proto-fascist neo-Nazis. I mean, come on. What? They're following them because they just like to be, check up on the proto-fascist neo-Nazi 23-year-old white supremacist kid? Or as they say, if there was no supply, there would be no demand. Luke Barnes, also of Think Progress, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Oh, another reminder, a lovely roasted corn is in this chowder because otherwise it wouldn't be Tarrytown Chowder, folks. It would not be Tarrytown. All right, got that out of the way. Okay, Luke Barnes brings us this offering. White nationalist is arrested for threatening to attack another Jewish community center, this time in Ohio. So, of course, the White House says we have to go after Antifa because they are the terrorist organization that doesn't have an organization. Fancy that. But they're going to go after Antifa, whatever that is. Like I say, going after Antifa is like going after comedy. Antifa is a concept. It's an idea. Just because a bunch of black bloc jokers are out there under the aegis of Antifa doesn't make them comedians. Let's be clear. Police in Ohio this weekend arrested a 20-year-old. Yeah, just leave it up to the youth, just by attrition. When we all die off, they're going to have a paradise of racial harmony. All we have to do is sit back and let it happen. Just love each other, and everybody will love each other. Don't worry. Yeah. How many times have I read that novel before? Oh, it's not a novel, it's a Lifetime movie. And eventually, people leave the urban environments of whatever, and, I don't know, they buy a decrepit B&B out in the middle of nowhere where they have no business, and they spruce it up, and, it's like it can be in Sunset Magazine. Or at least Good Housekeeping. James Reardon Jr., yeah, that's a familiar name now, isn't it? Yeah, Charlottesville. Posted a video on Instagram earlier this month in which he was seen shooting a semi-automatic rifle with screams and sirens in the background. Well, new Middletown Police Chief Vincent D'Agidio, D'Agidio. I butchered the guy's name. We'll call him Vincent. Chief Vincent said that the post, as well as Reardon's other social media activity, which was allegedly filled with racist slurs and comments, kicked off a very rapidly evolving investigation. Now, the right wing are going to argue that they are being investigated because of their speech. You cannot threaten to kill people. You cannot threaten violence. And I got to tell you, let's stop getting away with threatening property violence and destruction. Let's stop it. I would suspect that if someone shouts fire in a crowded theater like that they would be held to account, or at least be looked into to figure out their intentions. And when those intentions are determined, then charges are filed. As well they should. Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Florida bar found Representative Matt Gaetz, Repug of Florida. As if we didn't know. But for those of you who don't, he is. He's repugnant, and he happens to be a Republican from Florida, so we just shorten that to Repug. Saves spaces. Saves characters. Well, the bar found that he was unprofessional, reckless, insensitive, and demonstrated poor judgment when he sent an intimidating message to Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, on the eve of Cohen's February congressional testimony. In a letter sent to Gaetz, the Florida bar did not formally discipline the congressman, but did reiterate that Gaetz's actions were not consistent with the high standards of our profession, and in light of the public nature of your comments, your actions do not reflect favorably on you as a member of the Florida bar. Slap on the wrist. Actually, I don't even think it's a slap on the wrist. But at the time, legal analysts said Gaetz may have broken the law, which forbids tampering with or intimidating a witness prior to an official proceedings, because on the night before Cohen testified, Gaetz addressed Cohen on Twitter, writing, "Hey, Michael Cohen, do your wife and father-in-law know about your girlfriends? Maybe tonight would be a good time for that chat." I wonder if she'll remain faithful when you're in prison. She's about to learn a lot. Wow. And, of course, we know that Matt Gaetz is a Trump lapdog. And apparently wants to be one of Trump's attack dogs. Yeah, that's what he wants. Soldier in the army. That's what he wants. Well, Gaetz eventually deleted the tweet, and the following day was forced to apologize on the House floor for his conduct. In May, the Florida bar opened an investigation into Gaetz's actions, saying Gaetz is an attorney and member of the bar. While no action was taken, the letter states unequivocally that Gaetz's actions were not up to their standards, and we're talking Florida. Well, Cohen did not seem intimidated by Gaetz's threat when he testified before the House Oversight Committee. Cohen testified under oath that Trump is a racist who lies about his wealth and likely committed multiple crimes, but Gaetz's devotion to Trump is unaltered because when you're in a cult, it doesn't matter what reality is. Truly. A month after Cohen's testimony, Gaetz admitted that he is in Congress to protect Trump. He continually attacks those who speak ill of Trump, even in the wake of tragedies like the white supremacist mass shooting in El Paso. In a message to the Pensacola News-Journal, Gaetz claims he was very pleased with the result, and I'm always grateful when I get advice from my fellow attorneys and constituents. In this case, the advice is to be more professional and less reckless, and of course, Gaetz will say, hey, I'm a rich boy. I do what I want, when I want to do it. Well, it looks like we are going to have to get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky.
In the early years of the development of gunpowder, it was known as the devil's distillate because of its seemingly sinister properties. So where do those properties come from? Well, they come from the three principal ingredients of gunpowder, which are sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter. Three naturally occurring materials, which when combined produce something much greater than the sum of their parts.
Stephen Ressler. He served 34 years in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and retired as a brigadier general. He spoke at sea aboard a Scientific American cruise August 17th off the coast of Scotland. His subject was how fortifications had to evolve once gunpowder was widely in use. Ressler revealed a little basic chemistry about the constituents of gunpowder and how they're represented in a familiar uniform.
Sulfur, a mineral found in nature, yellowish or gold in color, burns at a relatively low temperature, and that made it a material of intense interest in the Middle Ages, where alchemists were constantly looking for magical properties of materials. Sulfur seemed to be one of those materials that had magical properties because it was a stone that burned, and it burned at a relatively low temperature. Charcoal. The product of the combustion of wood, typically hardwood, in an oxygen-starved environment, produces pure carbon, but not just any old pure carbon with a very fine microscopic lattice-like structure that actually turns out to be absolutely essential to the functioning of gunpowder. And then finally, the third and really in many ways the most important ingredient in gunpowder, and that's saltpeter. The chemical composition is actually potassium nitrate, and it's a waste product of decomposing organic matter. That's all it is. It's a white material that appears on the surface of fermenting organic material. And turns out to be the absolutely essential material in gunpowder. Okay, I have to pause for a totally unrelated diversion because sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter have great personal significance to me above and beyond the fact that they're constituent materials of gunpowder, and that is they form the basis for the school colors of my alma mater, the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Black, gray, and gold, the school colors, are explicitly defined as the three materials of gunpowder. Black, charcoal, gray is saltpeter, and gold is the sulfur. So the next time you see that inevitable video on the evening news of the graduation at West Point and all the cadets throwing their hats up in the air, think about gunpowder, because that's what the black, gray, and the gold are meant to signify.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
But Mom...
Don't but Mom me. You heard what the doctor said.
I'm fine. I just got my bell rung. It's not like I blacked out.
You've had headaches, dizzy spells, and you're just not yourself. That's not feeling fine.
Come on, I can't miss the game.
It's still serious, even if you didn't black out. It's better to miss one game than the whole season.
All concussions are serious. Know the warning signs and never let your child return to play before a healthcare professional says it's okay. A message from CDC.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? But did he balance on that big chair? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
It's Monday. Time to pay the gangs. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. That's the beginning of a recent piece about Honduras by Sonia Nazario in the New York Times that went on to report that the gangs of Honduras extract an estimated $23 million per year from the owners of anything that has wheels. This is a deadly serious business. Emphasis on deadly. Quote, since 2010, more than 1,500 Hondurans working in transportation have been murdered, shot, strangled, cuffed to the steering wheel, and burned alive while their buses are torched, end quote. And the gangs are taking more steps to fully take over the police, the courts, and the Congress. The article disputes President Trump's position that sending any money to Central America is a waste of money and explains how the money can be well and effectively spent by funneling it to Honduran civil society groups instead of to the government that is indeed horrifyingly infected by corruption and violence. The article concludes by saying that such aid and involvement will require a long-term, 10 or 20-year commitment. Quote, but in the end, it will be far cheaper and more humane to fund change in Honduras than to spend billions locking up asylum seekers at our borders. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1964. President Lyndon Baines Johnson gave a mid-morning address in the Rose Garden of the White House. He was there to sign the Economic Opportunity Act that launched what became known as Johnson's War on Poverty. During his speech, the president declared, "On this occasion, the American people and our American system are making history." He said, "We will work through our communities all over the country to develop comprehensive community action programs with remedial education, with job training, with retraining, with health and employment counseling, with neighborhood improvement. We will strike at poverty's roots." The initiative included multiple programs. Among them was a Job Corps to provide basic workplace training to young workers ages 16 to 21. Work-study money was made available for low-income college students. Assistance was provided for agricultural workers and rural families. In 1965, Congress allocated $800 million for the program, but many in Congress opposed the initiative and did all they could to limit its scope and funding. Historians, the press, and the general public have long debated the impact of President Johnson's war on poverty. Many have noted that the funding levels were never high enough for a fully effective jobs training and anti-poverty program. In 1981, Congress repealed the act during the first year of Ronald Reagan's presidency. Fortunately for many families living in poverty, the programs started as a result of President Johnson's war on poverty still remain. The AFL-CIO published an article reflecting on the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty. It called for raising the minimum wage. The article stated, "Clearly, we cannot be serious about ending poverty as long as those who get employment still find themselves below poverty."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
I agree with the Deputy Commissioner of Trials' legal findings and recommendations. It is clear that Daniel Pantaleo can no longer effectively serve as a New York City police officer. In carrying out the court's verdict in this case, I take no pleasure. I know that many will disagree with this decision, and that is their right. There are absolutely no victors here today. Not the Garner family, not the community at large, and certainly not the courageous men and women of the police department who put their own lives on the line every single day in service and to the people of this great city.
More than 5 years after he placed Eric Garner in an illegal and fatal chokehold, New York police officer Daniel Pantaleo was fired. The decision announced by New York City Police Commissioner James O'Neill. Garner's daughter, Emerald, wearing a T-shirt with the word murderer written across a picture of Pantaleo, thanked the commissioner for his decision, then promised that this is just the first step toward justice.
We will be going for the congressional hearings. We will be trying to reopen the case. We will be going after the rest of the officers involved because it's not over.
Planned Parenthood is giving up tens of millions of dollars in federal money over a new Trump administration rule that would restrict its clinics from making abortion referrals. Planned Parenthood calls the new policy unethical and dangerous, saying it could limit services to more than 1 million of its patients. CBS News' Jan Crawford has more.
We refuse to engage with an administration that is going to force us not to deliver the best possible care to our patients.
Planned Parenthood acting president and CEO Alexis McGill Johnson says her organization was forced out of the Title X funding by the Trump administration. Title X subsidizes family planning services for some 4 million women nationwide. Planned Parenthood says it has served about 40% of those patients that it says might now have to seek care elsewhere. The president has championed the rule for months with religious conservatives who have pushed for it.
We've issued a final rule to prohibit Title X taxpayer funding from subsidizing the abortion industry.
The impact will mean that people may choose to forego care. They may choose to delay their care until this is resolved. And that's what's unacceptable.
By law, the federal money could never be used to perform abortions. But under the new rule, clinics that receive money under Title X programs can no longer refer patients for abortions.
The calls for impeaching Donald Trump grew a bit louder on Monday when the number 4 House Democrat, Congressman Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico, who's running for Senate and competing in a contested primary, came out in favor of the push, making him the highest-ranking member of the caucus to do so. Lujan is the assistant speaker and former chairman of the House Democratic campaign arm. He said in a statement that he moved into the pro-impeachment column due to warnings that Russian efforts to interfere in U.S. elections have continued into the 2020 cycle. In a related story, the chairwoman of the Federal Election Commission, Ellen Weintraub, sent Donald Trump a letter on Saturday telling him there is no evidence of rampant voter fraud in 2016 or in any other U.S. election, suggesting he produce evidence of his claims of voter fraud or cease his repeated assertions of illegal voting. Trump began making these accusations after he failed to win the popular vote in 2016. He then subsequently put his vice president in charge of a special commission to investigate allegations of election fraud, but the panel was quickly disbanded by the White House a year later without uncovering any evidence to back up Trump's statement that 3 to 5 million ballots were illegally cast for Clinton. But Trump continues lie-tweeting about it. The idiot-in-chief this time said, falsely, that Google, quote, manipulated from 2.6 million to 16 million votes for Hillary Clinton. Yeah, I guess this time he was referring to a segment on Fox Business about psychologist Robert Epstein, who alleged in congressional testimony this summer that he found pro-Clinton bias in Google search results. But there's no evidence that Google manipulated the results to favor Clinton. Google and others saying Epstein's bias claim is wrong. Well, despite repeated assurances from Trump administration officials that U.S. consumers are not bearing the brunt of its tariffs on China, a new analysis from J.P. Morgan predicts that the average American family will be on the hook for $1,000 a year. A new report from the United States Study Center at Australia's University of Sydney claims that the U.S. military is not the primary force anymore in Asia, and it would struggle to defend its allies against the Chinese, further saying that missiles from China's rapidly improving military could overwhelm U.S. bases in the region in a matter of hours. And finally, the first Republican has stepped up to back the assault weapons ban. Representative Peter King of New York on Monday became the first House Republican to join 200 Democratic co-sponsors of the bill titled the Assault Weapons Ban of 2019. It was introduced in February by Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island. May the floodgates open. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I really can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Just click the donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expected a high of about 88 to 92. Overnight lows in the mid to low 60s tomorrow, expecting a high in the mid 80s with quite a bit of opportunity. And I say opportunity because chance is what you make it. Looks like we're going to get almost 1/10 of an inch of rain, and we want it in whatever form we get it. We look forward to it in the summer. So that's something to look forward to. Winds right now are light and variable out of the west, and will pick up out of the west in just a couple of hours to their usual 5 to 10 miles per hour of what I call a scouring wind. Shifting tonight out of the west-northwest, continuing at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And winds will be light and variable tomorrow while we have about 1/10 of an inch of rain. Keep our fingers crossed. It's almost 60% opportunity. It's what you make it, folks. It's not chance. Grass pollen is rated at low. Air quality index is at 18 parts per million, which is good. And the daytime UV index is still considered high at 7. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.76 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 78%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 71 degrees and sunny. Paris is 78 degrees and sunny. Rome is 90 degrees and sunny, and they've taken off their heat advisory that was going to impact their electrical infrastructure. Fortunately, not too many brownouts and blackouts in Rome. Kiev is 90 degrees and fair. Kabul is 80 degrees and fair, but not to any wedding parties that may be having a little wedding party trek. Be careful, the drones are flying whenever it's fair. Hong Kong is 80 degrees with a rain shower. Tokyo is 78 degrees and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 50 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and cloudy with a wind advisory for small craft on the bay and offshore. And New York is 84 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Noah Sin and Tom Westbrook of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Britain said it was extremely concerned by reports that a staff member at the consulate in its former colony of Hong Kong had been detained in mainland China. Simon Cheng did not return to work on August 9th after visiting the neighboring mainland city of Shenzhen. Hong Kong news website HKO1 reported, citing an interview with his girlfriend and family. Hong Kong has been gripped by anti-government protests in recent weeks. I would say pro-democracy. But, this is Reuters, and I suppose they need access. Britain, the United States, and other countries have urged China to respect the one country, two systems formula under which Hong Kong returned to China in 1997. And apparently China says, hey, we're in a trade war. Make us.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Nelson Rentiera of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A Salvadoran court acquitted a woman accused of homicide after giving birth to a stillborn baby in a case that drew international attention to the socially conservative nation's strict abortion ban. Evelyn Hernandez, age 21, was previously convicted of intentionally inducing an abortion and had already served 3 years of a 30-year prison sentence. In February, the Supreme Court ordered Hernandez released and retried, saying that the original judge's decision was based on prejudice and insufficient evidence. Hernandez was raped by a gang member and said she was unaware of her pregnancy until just shortly before she gave birth to a stillborn son in April of 2016. Well, justice has been done, no matter how late. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.